So, hello, everybody, and welcome. Yes, welcome back here at BSN Network. Today, we welcome you back here at BSN Network. This is the BSN Network podcast here today. It is Monday, August 24th. Hope everybody's having a good day so far and a good rest of their day yesterday. I know I did. It was a good weekend for me. Hopefully, you had a good weekend as well. It's Monday. It stinks, but, I don't like Mondays. I'm not a big fan. I've always said that. Not a big fan of Mondays, but we'll get through it and we'll move on the week soon, so that's good. But we've got Monday Sports Talk today, BSN Network Sports Talk on slate. We got a lot of stuff on slate, a lot of topics today to talk about for today's podcast. We got Earl Thomas, Ravens, Cowboys, and NFL teams. Earl Thomas got released by the Ravens due to a fight that broke out at Ravens camp. They thought that it was not necessary to have him on the team anymore. One of the better safeties in the league when he's got his head on straight and when he's on. Had an issue with the Seahawks, having an issue with the Ravens. I'm finding a common theme of who this player could be going with. I'm not going to say who. I'll tell you in just a minute or two. And that's all coming up right up next here. Then we have... Then we got the Jets' false test. So the Jets have false tests. So false positive. So meaning these tests came back positive, but they weren't really positive. So yes, it said 7 or 10 teams get tested positive, but they weren't really positive. They were all negative. 77 players tested positive. 77 of them came back negative. Because they were a false positive, they took them to a lab. They realized these are not real positives. They're not false, which once again could be happening around the whole country right now. Who really knows? It could be happening around the whole U.S. It could be happening in the whole country. This is where sports starts to expose kind of the real testing. You could say you're positive, you could not even have it. So this is where it starts to kind of expose. You wonder how many test positive people have had that they're really not positive. Unless if you really know you have it because you have symptoms or something, or you were really in contact with somebody. Other than that, if you just get tested, and you test negative, well, that's 100% not negative because now, look, 77 positive tests were all false. They weren't positive, they were negative. So that is good news for the NFL. That is great news for the NFL that they were negative. But now we'll talk about that coming up in a little bit. Then we have the Yankees, Mets, Nets, and Islanders, the final Nets talk of the year. We'll talk about kind of just their season and into next season, and then whatever free agency, whatever happens in free agency, whatever we do in the draft. But for topics every day, I have the Yankees, Mets, Nets, and Islanders. The Nets I will not talk about because their season is done. So I'll talk about Yankees, Mets, Islanders until the Islanders get booted out, and then, of course, when the Yankees. But anyway, so Yankees, Mets, Nets, and Islanders coming up later on in the podcast. So with all that being said, this is the BSN Network podcast, and let's get right into it. So Earl Thomas contract terminated by Ravens, Cowboys, 49ers, Texans linked. So to sum this up, Earl Thomas gets kicked off the Ravens is pretty much the real deal. He got booted off the Ravens. To sum this up, he pretty much just got released. He got released. To really make this story that might seem a little confusing to people, he got released. There was a fight training camp with him and I think Kenny Clark, another safety. There was a fight with them two at training camp. Now, people might be questioning, why aren't you doing anything with Kenny Clark? Well, because Earl Thomas was really the one who started it. I saw it on video. I saw parts of it. They don't have the actual fight on video, but I saw parts of the video. It was pretty much Earl Thomas got it. I don't know if it was a blown coverage by Kenny Clark, although on the video they didn't even throw it near one of them. I don't know what the deal was, but it might have been a blown coverage or missed assignment by Kenny Clark. Then all of a sudden what they did is he took off his helmet, literally just threw it on the ground, kind of charged him, and all of a sudden things went crazy, things got wacky, and all of a sudden we're sitting here today talking about Earl Thomas not being on the Ravens. So it is a very wacky situation, to say the very least. It is a very weird situation, to say the least. In my opinion, I personally think that this Earl Thomas releasing is the right idea. Now, a lot of Ravens fans are upset. A lot of Ravens fans are mad. A lot of NFL fans don't really like the move. He is a great safety. He's an unbelievable player. He's one of the better players. He's one of the better defenders, one of the better safeties in the league when his head is straight on and when he is on and not injured like when he was with the Seahawks. When he was with the Seahawks 3 years ago, without a doubt, best safety in the league. Now, not the best safety in the league. The Jamal Adams, the Jets got the best safety in the league. Or the Seahawks got the best safety in the league. So, the Seahawks pretty much just gave up Earl Thomas, then they got Jamal. So, they're not missing out on much. But that's my whole point here. Right? This is my whole point. Right? Involving this whole Earl Thomas situation, I've said it. Right? Some people don't quite agree with me saying, oh, this is a good move for the Ravens. The Ravens deserved, or they deserve this. The Ravens really deserved to, keep him and stuff. They should not have released him. No, you release him. Because sometimes teams, coaches, players, GMs, whatever, that all falls under teams, don't really feel like being bothered with attitudes, with pretty much bad players, head cases, just kind of stupid, dumb things that happen on the field like what Earl Thomas did. They don't feel like being bothered with that. Because you know what that does? That then translates into the locker room. That then creates locker room bad. Then the locker room's all of a sudden bad. Then all of a sudden you're overall just in a bad position as a team, as a coach, as a GM. All of a sudden you're in a bad position as a franchise when your locker room starts to get heated up. And maybe that coach doesn't have much control over the locker room. So maybe people might be saying about the Ravens, people might be saying, oh, well, we should have kept him. He's a great talent, everything like that. Well, I would take attitude and I would take being a good team player over talent. Because if you have a roster, 53 guys roster, and those 53 guys, each and every one of them really liked each other, they were really good teammates, chemistry was very good, compared to you got a roster where it's broken, this guy hates this dude, he absolutely hates this guy, this dude just absolutely destroys him, hate him, okay, these guys got chemistry, but they're like third strings, hate him. That guy's not very good, but he still tries to fight everybody, right? Then all of a sudden, your team could not be a success. And look at the Jets. The Jets had another training camp fight the other day. The Jets have been in the bottom of the NFL, bottom of the AFC East for years now. You want to know why? Because their locker rooms isn't the best either. They don't got the best strained up locker room either. There's a lot of guys in that locker room that have some bad blood with each other. And it ain't good. It turns out into punches thrown. 2 days ago at training camp, there were punches thrown. Jordan Jenkins, Alex Lewis, Neville Hewitt, all those guys got in there. There were punches thrown. Now, everybody could always make that excuse. Well, there's high energy, lots of energy. See, they're really trying to just really, really have that game atmosphere. Well, if you're going to throw punches in a regular game, might as well not even play you because you're going to get thrown out. So if Earl Thomas is going to fight players in a regular game, fight his teammates, not listen to his coaches, then why bother keeping him on your team if he's not going to help you win? So I agree 100% with the Ravens making this move. I think it is one of the better moves they could have made. Without a doubt. And that's not an outrageous statement. All right, Earl Thomas, all of a sudden, he's like AB all of a sudden. He stuck the finger. He gave the finger to the Seahawks bench. Don't need to go into the whole details because it's just not necessary. But you get what I'm saying. He gave the finger to the Seahawks bench while he was riding out on the air castle. I think he blew out his ACL. Now, all of a sudden, he's getting into fights with the Ravens players because he's just, all of a sudden, something in his head turned. And all of a sudden now, he's crazy. And if I was an NFL team, I wouldn't even try to pick him up. Let him sit in free agency. Let him really sit there and really think about what he's done and how he could change himself. That's what I've said about AB. Don't pick him up because then he's just going to think that his attitude's going to get him there. Don't just pick him up. These teams, these coaches, these players want good locker rooms. They don't want a guy that's going to come in, be a great skill, but be an absolute, I don't really know what word to say, just absolute stupid when it comes to being with teammates, when it comes to being on plays. So, He got kicked out of camp. That is one of the first times I've seen a player just randomly just get kicked out of camp. Like he literally just got kicked out of camp. They had to ask him to leave camp. And then now he gets released by the Ravens. So if I was a team, I would not want to get Earl Thomas, to be honest. And like I said, that's not an outrageous statement. It's really not. That's almost like saying, let's get Antonio Brown now. Their heads are very alike. Antonio Brown causes trouble when he joins a team. Now it's Earl Thomas joining a team. Who's next? Let's hear it, NFL. Who's next? And just another one of these players that can't get their head screwed on straight, and now all of a sudden they're hurting their career because they can't do that. And that's not no player. Earl Thomas, when he's at the top of his game, is one of the best defenders in all of the league. And that's not crazy. Look at his numbers. Look at the stats. Compare him. Last season with the Seahawks or Ravens, he was good. He's been good with the Ravens. This is a Ravens team that was ranked number 1 in fantasy projections. Every projection possible. Now that rank might slip a little bit because Thomas is off them. But I'm not worried about the rank. I can care less about the rank. What I'm really worried about, is making sure that these players are in a good locker room and have players that they want to play with. Because obviously Earl Thomas doesn't want these players to be played with. Obviously Earl Thomas doesn't like the players on his team. Definitely doesn't like his other safety. Some people say, it's just the competitiveness. And, competitiveness, you could be competitive, but when you're throwing helmets at a guy and you're getting kicked out of training camp, there's a certain extent to competitive. Everybody, competitive can mean different things to different people, and I respect that. I don't really, somebody could say, this guy's very competitive. I don't really, that doesn't really bother me. Competitive can mean different to people. Competitive can mean different things to different people. My competitive is he goes out there, does everything he can to win. Practice, goes out there, gives it 100%. Is very good. Maybe he's very competitive, meaning like he's always wants to win. But when you're saying competitive, that doesn't mean, this guy's really competitive. He throws helmets at guys and gets kicked out of training camp. No, that is not competitive. That's not competitive. That's nowhere close to competitive. That's dirty play. That's dirty. That should get kicked you off. That should get you kicked off the team. And this is why Antonio Brown has not found himself on a team. He's turned into not a great teammate. He's turned into not a great coachable player. He's turned crazy. He does crazy things. Not good off the field. Not good on the field. Stirs the pot on the field. Stirs the pot off the field. And look where he's sitting right now. At his house, free agency, not on a team, because he can't get his head on straight. That is the same exact thing with Earl Thomas right now. Can't get his head on straight. Now has found himself in free agency. So, it's bad. It's bad. It is really bad. And like I said, everybody's like, so focused up on his skill. Everybody's so focused up on his name. Earl Thomas. I get it. He's a very good player. I've mentioned that multiple times on the podcast. But when you are throwing helmets, getting into fights with teammates, yelling at coaches, getting kicked out of camp, you don't deserve to be on any team. You deserve to be in free agency waiting to get your head straightened up. And then maybe you could decide. But at this moment, Earl Thomas deserves to get released. And I agree with this move 100%. Because at the end of the day, it is not all about the skill. At the end of the day, some of it is all about the players. All about the players. If he's good chemistry, if he's a likable player, because obviously Thomas has not been likable in that locker room. And I would like to hear what happens with all these other Ravens players. And you know what, too? Now this affects the Ravens, because now the Ravens had good training camps going. Now all of a sudden the Ravens got to make a releasing. They've got to deal with all that stuff. Now they can't, and now the media's all over them. Now they can't focus and completely hone in on just training. So now he's even affected that. He's even affected that part of the spectrum. So he's not only affected the team, but not only did he affect that practice, but now he's affecting everything. Because now the media, that's all the questions they're asking about. Oh, I'm sure they're going to ask the players today or whenever they ask them. Oh, how do you feel about this Earl Thomas releasing? What do you feel about Earl Thomas? How do you feel about this, and this? Well, all of a sudden, you know, now all of a sudden he's getting released. So, and this is a report that literally just came out. Bleacher Report just posted it. 8:30 here. Pro Bowl defensive back Earl Thomas wasn't well liked. Had a pattern of being late, had assignment errors, and missed a walkthrough before release. You know, I mean, and you know, he's asking for it. And I feel again in a way that's kind of saying release me, but I don't think he's going to do anything else if he joins another team. I like to see it. I could very well see him joining the Niners because Sherman's there, and Sherman already said that he's still a beast. But do you really want a beast that's going to throw helmets at each other? You know, today, August 24th, 2020, Earl Thomas deserves to get released, and he deserves to be sitting in free agency right now. He does. And that's not an outrageous statement. Earl Thomas contract terminated by Ravens, Cowboys, 49ers, Texans linked. You know, he just seems like he just doesn't want to play. He just didn't want to be there. Baltimore Ravens have terminated contract of safety Earl Thomas as a result of altercation with a teammate at practice. The team announced Sunday. Before Baltimore said the decision was made because of a personal conduct that has adversely affected the team. After the Ravens announced Thomas' exit, the safety posted a message on his Instagram account thanking the team for his time in Baltimore via Mike Garfolo of NFL Network. So that's Earl Thomas' Instagram. ESPN's Adam Schefter previously reported the team would either cut or trade Thomas after the incident. Schefter noted the Dallas Cowboys are the favorites to land Thomas if he is cut by Baltimore. NFL Network's Ian Rappaport reported the San Francisco 49ers and Houston Texans are also teams to watch when it comes to Thomas. Thomas, who was sent home from practice Friday after a fight with fellow safety Chuck Clark, per Tom Brasillo. Pelissero of the NFL Network. He was told to stay home Saturday despite the team returning to practice. The veteran attempted to explain his side of the story on Instagram, noting confrontation was a result of busted coverage during practice. And I'm not going to really do all these video Instagram things. Head coach John Harbaugh was upset about the extent of the fight with via Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk. It just lasted longer than it needed for me. You're going to have these things in training camp. I think you're going to have tempers flare. Sure, it happens every training camp, especially right about now, probably. But I don't like them when they extend like that and eat into our reps. And we're going to have to find out why and make sure that doesn't happen again. He's right, and I'm not saying this isn't true. Fights happen in training camp, especially about now, and he did that because players are fighting for roster spots, especially if you're in a position. Now, Earl Thomas had a secure starting job, so I don't know why he would absolutely just throw that in the trash. But players, especially some of these players, like even like in Neville Hewitt, he got in that little scrum yesterday. He's still fighting for that starting job. You know, he will probably be a second or first stringer, but he's still fighting for it. He will probably be a first stringer, but very well Blake Cashman could come right up behind him and swoop him up and be like, no, I'm starting. So players want to give every rep they can, and that's true. But when there's a fight like this where the fight like gets so crazy, and now all of a sudden they're finding out that Earl Thomas wasn't very liked, he missed training camp, or he was always late, didn't really care, was kind of sloppy. Now you know why he's released. But Players get in fights all the time. I went to Jet training camp last year. There was a little scrum that busted. 30 seconds, done. Not 5 minutes of just fighting. Right? It happens every year. There's always going to be some little scrum because players are, that I guess that is a little bit of the competitiveness in them. But being competitive doesn't mean fight everybody every time. But players do just want to give it their all. Some players just go out there in training camp and just give it their all, especially these players that are fighting for roster spots. As a matter of fact, that's where I don't understand where Earl Thomas was coming from, because they were he's not fighting for a roster spot. He's kind of a secure slot starter. You're talking about one of the better safeties in the league when he's on. Now, all of a sudden, he's in a dump right now. The team's leadership council made its voice heard by telling the organization they would prefer Thomas not be around, per Jason Lockenfora of CBS Sports. Lockenfora added teammates strongly support Clark in this scenario. Friday reportedly was not the first time Thomas had been disciplined by the team, according to Jeff Zybrick of The Athletic. Thomas had been fined several times since training camp began earlier this month. So maybe he was trying to fight for roster spot, because who knows? Maybe Chuck Clark was giving his all and Thomas was kind of lollygagging. Though Thomas was signed through 2022, a $10 million fully guaranteed salary for 2020, his guarantee could be voided for conduct detrimental to the team, per Florio. Baltimore also has depth at the position with second-year player Deshaun Elliott, while free agent Tony Jefferson could also be an option after spending last season with the team. Thomas is still an elite player when he's on the field. He's earned his 7th Pro Bowl selection last year and has been named first-team All-Pro 3 times. He was also the key part of the Seattle Seahawks winning the Super Bowl after the 2013 season. The 31-year-old finished last season with 49 tackles, 2 sacks, 2 interceptions, and 1 fumble recovery. It's another thing, too. He's 31 years old. It's not very early on in his career either. This could very well be. He's 31. 31, getting a little old for a football player. You could very well see him play a couple more years, and maybe you could very well see him play up to 40. Who knows? He could play 9 more years, but normal football player, 33, 34, maybe you could see him play 3-4 more years, and that could be it. So, if I was him, I wouldn't have done this. I guess in the heat of the moment, you're not really thinking, and you just go your actions sometimes just take over. You just kind of just take over. And then everybody says, think in these moments. When you're out there on a football field with coaches there, you're mad. You're not really thinking about what you're gonna do, and everybody knows that. Everybody's happened to it. But when you throw a helmet, same thing with Myles Garrett. His actions, he said, took over. No, it's not. That's true. But in the heat of the moment, you're not going to be thinking, I shouldn't be doing this. This is almost what happened to Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett took that helmet, threw it across Mason Rudolph's head. He got suspended. The Browns didn't release him because it wasn't with another teammate. And also, I just don't think they did. I think the Browns very well should have released him. But they didn't release him. He says he's better than ever. They said that he's clean at training camp. I'm sure there might be them against the Steelers this year. There might be some interesting things that happen with Garrett. That would be interesting to see. But I really gotta say this. I think Earl Thomas, this was the right move. And I think this is the right move on many accounts. I think the Ravens handled this very well. Releasing him, getting him out of there. Teammates didn't like him. Coaches didn't like him. Late to practice. Got fined multiple times. Every little piece of being a bad teammate, bad player for the organization. He had good move for the Ravens. And Ravens, I think, will be much, much more successful at that position. We'll get a lot more done in training camp, it seems, than have a guy throw a helmet at a guy and fight. So, Earl Thomas released by the Ravens. Who do you think he'll go next? I think very well he could go to the Niners. I know the Cowboys are the front runners, and I could very well see him going there. But here's my reason with the Niners. The Niners have Richard Sherman. Richard Sherman came out yesterday and said that he's still one of the best safeties in the league. He's still an elite player. I think, in a way, Sherman and Thomas were dominant with each other. They were there all that time in Seattle. Then Sherman left and then Thomas left. Then all of a sudden, they could reunite back at San Francisco and add on to an already good defense. But here's the thing. Is Earl Thomas going to carry that head, that attitude, that bad stuff that he did in Baltimore with him? We'll see. That's going to be the true test. Whatever team gets him, you're going to get a good player, but are you going to get a head case? Are you going to get a player that makes dumb decisions? Are you going to get a player like an Antonio Brown? That's the real question. That's what I would like to say. So, that should be interesting. And he's also getting released late. There's only 4 more Sundays until week 1. He gets picked up. He doesn't practice. Let's just say he gets picked up a week from now. He has 2 weeks to get ready. That's not much to learn the playbook. Now actually it is a good amount, but you still got to get reps in with your team. Got to build that chemistry, right? You got to watch out. Because now all of a sudden, he was on a team, had that chemistry built. Now all of a sudden, things could get interesting. I think it could get very well interesting for whoever picks him up. I don't think that's an outrageous statement. I think that's very true. I think it will get interesting. Whatever team picks him up, it's going to be interesting, is what I'm trying to say. So, anyway, Earl Thomas contract terminated by the Ravens, Cowboys, 49ers, Texans linked to him, trying to get him. That should be interesting. Couple of days to see who lands him, if anyone lands him. I don't know. After hearing all these reports, because more reports are coming out about how bad of a teammate he was. After hearing these reports, these teams might not even want that kind of attitude, that kind of player in the locker room. So we should see. Should be interesting to watch, and should be interesting to see what happens. Really, what happens? I kind of want to know what happens, and I want to know if he gets signed, what are they going to be the things. And I said this about Antonio Brown. If Antonio Brown's going to get signed by the team, they got to bring him into a room with the head coach, the GM, and the owner. Or maybe just head coach and GM. And maybe the coordinators. Bring him into a room, small room, and sit him down and say, enough is enough. We're not accepting anything you do. If you do one bad thing on the field or off, we're releasing you. There's no other way to it. Sign him to a 1-year, not much money deal and see what he does. If he doesn't act up, here's the problem, though. Antonio Brown, when he got his big money, he started to act up. So if you sign him to a 1 year, he might not earn his money, then all of a sudden start acting up again. So it'll be interesting. But it's a very interesting story, and I want to see what happens with him going forward here. So this should be interesting. But anyway, so several NFL teams get positive test reports. New Jersey lab linked to 77 false positive coronavirus tests among 11 NFL teams. We'll talk about that coming right up. All right, so there was a big testing fail the other day in training camp for every team. There was a big testing fail. So reports, New Jersey lab linked to 77 false positive coronavirus tests among 11 teams. Among 11 NFL teams. So here's the deal. Here's the deal with this big thing. So 11 NFL teams got word that they had multiple positive tests. I'm going to go focus on the Jets here. The Jets had 10 positive tests on their team. And at first, when they first heard it, they thought they were going to have to cancel training camp. They were actually planning on canceling training camp, and then the NFL kind of told them, hold up, wait a minute. Don't do anything yet. They take it to a lab to New Jersey, which is where they can do the quick testing, making sure everything's right. And all of a sudden, those tests that were all positive, every single positive test that happened in the NFL yesterday are now negative. So 77 false positive tests. So 77 positive tests, they're all negative. When I heard the news that the Jets had 10 positive tests, I was a little concerned. And then when I really ran into it, it was like false positive. So what people I don't think quite understand here is it's a false positive test, meaning those positive tests that were turned into positive. So it's almost like, let's just say, I don't know, Billy Bob Joe, or let's just say my pen test is positive, right? Or whatever. Let's just say just a random person tests positive. That random, just call them random. Let's just say random person tests positive. They took that random person's test to a lab. That lab realized it was not really positive. That was a false positive. So now, technically, that random person is a negative. So all these tests are negative now. So false positive mean they were positive, but they're not really positive. The test showed they were positive, but they're not positive. They're not. So they are negative. So the tests are really negative. There's really not 10 players on the Jets that tested positive, not 77 players throughout 11 teams that tested positive. That's the deal. So this is great news. I knew it all along. It was clear. The words were right there. False positive means you didn't test positive for the virus. So the Jets continued on training camp. The other teams continued on training camp. I know the Bears, the Jets, the Bills were involved into that, and among 11 teams to test positive. So they're all negative. Everybody's doing fine. NFL's precautions are doing pretty well. They're all negative. There was a little bit. That was really the first NFL testing worry that we've had all season long. And the worry didn't even come true. It wasn't even real that all these players had the virus. So this is great news. Good news for the NFL. Good news for the Jets. And I guess just good news overall. So, but, at first it was a little worrisome that you heard that these teams were testing positive because you're like, oh gosh, here we go. Here's a spike. What is this team going to do? They're going to have to wait. And then when you're like, well, the report never came out that they were positive. It said 10 false positive. False positive. So it was 10 false. So false means they're not true. So the positive tests are not positive. They are negative. So every single one of these players are negative. Now, you're going to have these testing fails. There's just no other way around it. You're going to have these testing fails. This is the first time the NFL had one. You're going to have a couple of these. I don't know if the MLB had one. The MLB did. They had a back thing on the testing. The Nationals had to cancel practice. I remember this was when they were just starting to really make sure that they were to make sure that they were doing all this stuff, meaning the testing was a delay. So Nationals players were getting tested, but they weren't getting their test back. They weren't finding out. So they had to cancel practice in order for them to wait. There was a testing delay. There's delay in testing that happens. There's also false positives that happen. There's going to be a couple testing roadblocks. That is the really hardest part about this whole NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL restarting. It's the whole testing thing, right? Because testing, you can only test so much, right? So now you're gonna have some woes and some bad things without the testing. But what I mean is with the New Jersey lab linked to 77 false positive coronavirus tests among 11 teams, they're negative. So you're gonna have some of these testing fails. They all came up positive. You're gonna have some of these negative. I wonder what 11 players had, or what 10 players thought they had it. That must have been quite a nerve-wracking time, though. Because, it says that they were false, but you don't know 100%. Now the report is 100% that they were false. At first, when it first reported, you were like, okay, you tested positive. No, but they're false. And you're kind of just sitting there, and, as a player, if you got it, you're kind of sitting there, okay, all right. Am I false? Am I negative? Am I positive? What is it? Am I negative? What is it? Right? And sure enough, they're all negative, which is great news for the NFL. Great news for anybody. Great news for anybody who thought they tested positive and now they're negative, because now they can continue on practice. You don't have to wait. You don't have to worry about all this. And this is something that is kind of just goes back to regular reality. I'll get back on the sports train. But if you just talk about regular everyday life, this could be happening every day. Somebody could be testing positive, and that positive test could not be true. That's why I think people should really listen to what's happening in sports. You might not be a sports person, but sports now that you're trying to play during a pandemic, sports is, you have to watch out, because sports is a big deal. They're trying to get sports back. Sports is a big deal, right? They're trying to get sports back. That's the big deal. So I think a lot of people should listen to what's happening in sports. Look at this situation that just happened. As a regular everyday person that doesn't really watch sports or doesn't really, care about sports, you should think about this. New Jersey lab linked to 77 false positive tests. So just because you test positive, this could be the same way in the negative. If you test negative, that means nothing. You could still be positive. If you test positive, you could be negative. Right now, all of a sudden, this is where the testing hasn't been right, I don't think, ever since this virus started. So now all of a sudden you see these sporting leagues are going through it. Now you wonder, are these every day? Are people going through this? And I would like to see that, because you really wonder if all these numbers that are coming out about how many people test positive are real. Because now all of a sudden, how many of them are false? How many of them are negative? Because it's not just like the NFL only has the false positive test. You're going to have people that get false positive. That's why everybody asks for you to test negative twice. Yes, test negative twice. Same thing if you have the virus in the MLB, you have to test negative twice to come back. Because just because you tested once doesn't mean anything. You test negative twice, all right, now you're going. You could test negative 10 times and it couldn't be. You could test positive 10 times and then none of them could be positive. Right? I mean, and that's the real big deal. And that's what's so crazy about this is because you could test negative and be like, oh, let me go back into the public. Wear a mask, obviously. Go back into the public. You don't know you have it. You could still spread it. So that's what's interesting about this whole thing. And this is where the testing can actually really hurt sports, hurt teams, hurt franchises, hurt fans. Hurt fans because if the Jets had to get shut down, that would have stunk. Because now we're delayed. Now all of a sudden we're shut down for about a week. Now all of a sudden that's a week of practice that you miss. So the NFL, this was their first real situation where they had a testing issue. And they handled it very well. Every sporting league so far has handled it very well. So far so good for the NFL. Had a little bit of an iffy test yesterday. But all came back negative, which was good. So, should be interesting to see what happens now. So it reports New Jersey lab linked to 77 false positive coronavirus tests among 11 NFL teams. So a major issue with the New Jersey lab processing coronavirus test results for the NFL was revealed on Sunday. After testing was done on the previously reported 77 positive results, it now appears that they were all false positives. After each of the 77 people were retested and received a negative result, according to multiple reports. So Tom Pelissero, a total of 77 tests from 11 NFL teams processed by the same New Jersey lab came back positive from Saturday's COVID-19 testing, per league source. All 77 individuals underwent an additional point of care test and all tested negative. So those tests are all negative. So they took that to the lab. The ones that they took to the lab were not true. They tested negative. Those were true. Tom Priscilla, a total of 77 teams from the NFL. Total of 77 teams from 11 NFL. Total of 77 tests from 11 NFL teams processed by the same New Jersey lab came back positive. He reported this. Under NFLPA protocol, the original tests are also being retested, and also as the result of those have been negative as well, per source. Further evidence of the lab issued that caused what now appears to be 77 false positives. Earlier Sunday, several NFL teams said they would alter or cancel workouts Sunday after the positive tests were reported. The league said it was investigating the results after the high number of resulted from one processing lab. The NFL said it would take immediate precautionary measures as outlined in the NFL and NFLPA health and safety protocols. The NFL coronavirus numbers were getting smaller. It still appears the NFL coronavirus numbers were getting smaller. On Saturday, 4 players were listed on the COVID-19 list. As of yesterday, there were only 4 players league-wide on the COVID-19 list. Some around the league were breaking for a potential small spike in cases once kids went back to school, but this is being framed initially as a lab issue. Teams affected by the false positive test: the Chicago Bears, New York Jets, Minnesota Vikings, Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Pittsburgh Steelers each reported large numbers of positive results from testing done by the New Jersey lab in question. The Bears said they learned COVID-19 testing identified 9 players' staff as positive. We followed additional NFL and NFLPA testing protocol and confirmed all 9 results as false positives. To be cautious, Chicago postponed the morning practice to the afternoon at 1:30 p.m. The Jets had 10 false positive COVID-19 tests this weekend, according to Adam Schefter. So after the Bears had 9 false positive tests this weekend and the Jets 10, the Vikings now have 12 presumptive positive tests from the same New Jersey lab that produced the other testing results. The Steelers will not officially say these were false positive tests, but the team did confirm that they used the same lab that turned up the irregularities with multiple other teams. On Saturday, this is a statement from the Steelers general manager, Kevin Colbert. On Saturday, we had 6 players absent from practice due to the adherence to the NFL COVID-19 protocol. None of those players were required to be placed on reserve COVID-19, and we will return to meetings today and practice on Monday. The Cleveland Browns did not reveal how many members of the organization were affected by the issue, but reopened their facilities once the lab issue was revealed. All activity in our building today has been paused, and meetings will be conducted virtually. Our statement on COVID-19 testing, I'm not going to read all that. Update, we are reopening building and resume at this time. Yeah, they're reopening. That's kind of all in the past and stuff. So that is all the stuff that went down. So as you could tell, as you could see, it affected a lot. It didn't just, it affected everything. It affected, now all of a sudden they had to go to virtual. These teams in the heat of the moment, they probably thought, oh great, here we go. This is where it gets real. And that's the whole thing about sports. Everything could be going well, and all of a sudden you get somebody that tested positive, and all of a sudden everything could be going well, then you get a big spike, and you're like, okay, here's where it gets real. Here's where we will see if these protocols were in place right. So that's the big deal. But great news for the NFL hearing that they were all negative. Now, I know it's not good news that they were false, though, because now you don't know what to trust. Do you still go to that New Jersey lab? Because now what if it's a negative? Are there such thing as a false negative? So now all of a sudden the NFL has to scurry a little bit and figure out a way to fix this. But what I'm saying is great news is that they were all negative tests. So yes, they showed positive, but they were negative. So that's the good news. The bad news is now they got to figure out, is this New Jersey lab trustable anymore? What are you going to do? Because now can you trust every test that comes out of there? So they did say they tested again, sent it there, and they were negative. So, but now do you believe that? I don't know. This is where it gets very confusing. Now the negative, they tested negative. All the players tested negative. 77 of them tested negative. It was weird because it was just like a spike. And that's the weird part, is all of a sudden just like, it wasn't across one team. Usually you see this spike across one team, and you'll see it across one team. But this was across many teams going to the same lab, same test, same positives. Start connecting the dots. It is false, and they're all back negative now. So it was very interesting. It was a very interesting couple of hours for the NFL yesterday. Very interesting couple of hours. Because they had to figure out, all these teams went in a scurry mode. They had to figure out, okay, we're canceling practices. We're going to virtual. In that moment, you got to know, these teams had to have been thinking, oh, great, here it goes. This is what could happen. But now, a couple hours later, it all came back negative, false positive. They said that they were very early on. They found out it was false. Like the positive test came out. They're like, 77 plays positive. Then like an hour later, it said false. So teams didn't have to do too much. It wasn't like it was a day later where they said it were all false. Teams didn't have to do too much. But teams did scurry. Even you heard the Browns being like, we're going to virtual only. This is where it gets interesting. Because and you're gonna have these testing fails. And I'll tell you what, the NFL handled this very well. They tested again. Because you want to make sure that they were negative. They tested again, both all negative. And those players too. Those players must have been very, like, when they found out they were positive, they're like, okay, how in tarnation did I get this? But good news that they're all negative, and the NFL had their first testing combust, I guess. I guess you could say first testing kind of combust. But interesting. Like what happens if they were doing a bubble and you found out about all this? Now all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, we're in a bubble. If somebody gets in a bubble, that's the problem with the bubble. The bubble could either be really good or somebody gets in and it's really bad. But this is great news for the NFL, like I said. And as a Jets fan yesterday, I heard the first report came out that they were false. So I was like, okay, well, if they're false. But then I was a little confused. I was like, okay, if other teams get it, how is it all false? And I was a little confused, but then I realized it was all to that same New Jersey lab. When I heard that the Jets tested positive and they were said from a New Jersey lab, I was like, well, because the Jets are obviously playing New Jersey, their training facilities in New Jersey, so they would probably go to a New Jersey lab. Maybe Pittsburgh or somebody else will go to that lab. I was like, well, how do you know that it's coming out of the New Jersey lab? It's because multiple teams go to that lab. These are the precautions I guess you got to take. Never did NFL probably think they would have to use a lab so often with involving in the NFL season. So, but good news that they're all negative. I know I've said that multiple times already, but good news for that. Jets are back on the training field. The Jets were back yesterday. They practiced. They have walkthroughs today. Then tomorrow they will have another full training camp. So easy day today, walkthroughs. I mean, they've practiced all through the weekend. They practiced Saturday and Sunday. They practiced the whole week, Saturday and Sunday. So now Monday, walkthroughs. Then tomorrow will be back to regular practice, full pads, everything like that, practice like that. So that's good. So NFL so far is going so good, so far so good. You had that little testing hiccup, but you got over that. Now you're riding a pretty smooth road right now. So you just got to make sure everything's stable, and obviously all the protocols were in place perfectly because obviously all the teams followed them. So, in that heat of the moment, teams did follow what happened, what their protocols were in place. So obviously they agreed with them. Obviously they felt that that was necessary to do that. So it all came back negative, which is good. Jets, like I said, practice, walk through today, then full pads the rest of the way for for the next 3 days and whatever. So, yep, so that's good. But yeah, so anyway, that's what I got for the NFL Jets false positive tests there. So now we move into the Yankees. So the Yankees-Mets game did get postponed. All these games got postponed this weekend. The Yankees do play tomorrow. I wanted to read some news. We know Gleyber Torres, James Paxton have found themselves on the IL. Gleyber Torres will miss about 2 weeks plus, and at least 2 weeks. And Paxton says he hopes he's ready for the playoffs. So who knows with that? You never like to see anybody get injured, but Paxton hasn't made a huge impact on us, and I'm not trying to say that him getting injured is good, but I'm not trying to say that at all. Paxton, you never want to see anybody get injured, especially in that forearm area that could require Tommy John. It's very good news that he doesn't need Tommy John, but Paxton hasn't made a huge impact on us, so maybe we could see whatever happens. Davy Garcia, they think, will be able to come up this week against these games and see what happens. Yankees start a set against the Braves tomorrow. I watched the Braves-Phillies game last night as well as the Nets game. Braves won, Phillies won. Swanson kind of tried to come home. He stole home and then kind of failed there. He stole home and then kind of couldn't completely do it. But Yankees obviously play tomorrow. Judge is coming back in the lineup. They said probably by tomorrow's game he should be good to go in the lineup, which is great news. And then obviously, Torres and them. And then Stan should be back soon. Stan should probably be back soon. So that's kind of the wrap on the Yankees news. Now we move to the Mets. The Mets have a Cincinnati Reds situation, which is exactly what I wanted to. They play home against the Marlins tomorrow. So they've had nobody else test positive for the virus since the situation. They've had nobody tested positive for the virus. This was an update that they had yesterday. I'll read it for you guys. The New York Mets today announced that the COVID-19 test taken on Thursday night and again Friday morning by the entire traveling party that returned to New York from Miami late Thursday night are all negative. The test result of close contacts for those that remained in Miami and also came back negative. The entire Mets traveling party will continue to be tested daily and remain in self-isolation. We will await further scheduling information from MLB and continue to provide updates when available. So that was their last tweet. That was a day ago. So it seems everything's still going good. So hopefully that's the case, that everything's going good, because even though I'm not a Mets fan, I still want to get him back because I talked about this on Friday, how it could mess everything up when a team tests positive like that. So anyway, so the Nets lost yesterday, 150 to 122. They had a playoff record. The Raptors scored 150 points. Not surprised at all. The Nets stink. Nets are done. They are headed back home. They're done for the season. Their season's over. They get swept in the first round of the series. It is what it is, right? And I've said this last night, when I was watching the game. I said this. I was like, hey, like next season is our season. Next season is really our season. But, I just hope that, the Nets can get on right and see what happens with our head coaching situation, who's our head coach, all that kind of stuff. And even here, tough exit tonight. Even here it showed this. Tough exit tonight. Brooklyn, just know it's never too early to start thinking about the next season, and that's true. Right here. If I can. It says tough exit tonight, Brooklyn. Just know it's never too early to start thinking about the next season. And it's a picture of Kyrie and KD next to each other. That really is the future. That is the future of this team. This is hopefully the beginning of something great for this Nets team. And when I was watching the game last night, I was mad. I was a little upset and stuff. Not crying at all, but I was mad. Like I wanted the Nets to obviously win the final. Every year I wanted my teams to win the finals. But I knew, when you really see that loss, you really know it's next season. It's this upcoming season that's really the big deal. You have all free agency. You got the draft. KD and Kyrie come back. It's going to be exciting, and I hope that the Nets are able to really dominate. That's what I hope there. But the Islanders play tonight against the Flyers. I give them a win. Islanders have been playing great hockey. I give them a win even though the Flyers are the 1 seed. Islanders have been playing great hockey. I give them the win. First game of the second round. This is going to be fun to watch. It's going to be fun to watch. It will be fun to watch. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So, I'll tell you that for sure. So it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So Islanders, tonight they play. Yankees, like I said, play tomorrow and stuff like that. So anyway, that's what I got for the podcast today. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. I know I did. I enjoyed doing them just like that. Or I enjoy doing them, just like this. 3 topics a day. And give you all the sports you need to know. So anyway, that's what I got for the podcast today. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. I'll see you all back here tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.